Welcome to In the News for September the 15th, 2023. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
This is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
It's been a week, Jeff. It has been a week.
Indeed.
First, though, we do want to say quickly, we are thrilled to welcome back our sponsor, returning sponsor, I should even say, SaneBox, SaneBox. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a little bit, but thrilled to have them back. And thank you, SaneBox, for working with us. And now on to a little bit of news that happened this past week,
Just a
Jeff.
little bit, my goodness.
On Tuesday, this past Tuesday, which would be September the 12th, we experienced an Apple event, and there were some announcements, things that I think we expected and we looked forward to. Maybe just a few things kind of between the lines that we didn't really expect, and maybe a little bit of surprises. I will tell you, I wasn't completely bowled over with everything, Jeff, but there were some important stuff, and maybe just because I expected some of these things, because otherwise there were some amazing announcements, starting with the new iPhone 15 and 15 Pro. Really excellent. Titanium for the win.
Yeah. Let me just start by addressing the first thing you said, is it an exciting announcement or not? The reality is that the iPhone has been around for so long that every once in a while, I mean, like years ago, we had the iPhone 10 with the brand new, edge-to-edge screen. That was an exciting announcement, but it's been around enough that I don't think I've seen this reaction before. People are like, oh, well, it doesn't suddenly, fly you to the moon. So it's not right. This is what the iPhone does, is they come up with incremental improvements year after year. Most people don't upgrade every year, but when you do get around to upgrading, you suddenly get to take advantage of a couple years of improvements, and it's a big step up from your old phone to your new phone. So with that in mind, I actually think that there's some nice improvements this year. Many of them had leaked, which is the other thing. So it wasn't a surprise.
Yes, exactly.
One of the biggest changes for the Pro line is to have this titanium casing, which we had all heard was going to be coming. And the one thing that was perhaps a surprise to me is we knew that the advantage of titanium is that it is lighter while still being durable. But I was excited to hear from the people that were actually there on Tuesday in Cupertino for the announcement, because they got to actually hold them in their hands. And they said, you know what? It really makes a difference. You can really tell, almost more so than it's literally 9 or 10% lighter, but people say it even feels more than that. Maybe that's because surface area or something like that. And so I thought that was really interesting, that it's going to feel lighter in your pocket. And that's good. And it was frankly one of the, not to bury the lead, but this morning they started taking pre-orders at 5 o'clock Pacific time. So 7 o'clock Central where I live. And I bought an iPhone. I bought the iPhone 15 Pro Max.
Max. You're going to the Max, Jeff.
So here's the thing. The reason I decided to do it, because I've been on the edge, is I actually got, this is a surprise to you, Brett, I actually got a package from Apple yesterday, and it was a big surprise to me, but I actually have in my hand an iPhone 15 Pro Max case.
Nice reveal, by the way, for people that are just listening. He did it from the very bottom, and I thought, wait a minute, that looks like an iPhone, but it's just a case. You sneaker.
Apple started selling these on Tuesday, and it actually showed up yesterday on Thursday. And so I've been holding this thing in my hand. And in fact, for folks that are watching on video, if I put my old iPhone Pro into this, you can sort of see, it's a little hard to see from the edges, but how much bigger it is. It is a little bit bigger, a little bit wider, and it's a little bit longer. But part of the reason I decided to make the jump, the main reasons were because of the new features, which we'll discuss in a second, but it was the fact that it was going to be lighter. And so I figured that if I'm going to ever make the jump from a Pro to a Pro Max, a year like this, where it's switching to titanium, it won't be as much of a weight increase to go to the larger model. So that was part of the logic for me. I will tell you, though, the other part of it was, and I had an opportunity to talk to Jason Snell earlier this week, and I mentioned that, and he said that the weight is not the big issue. He said the big issue is actually the size in your hand, that when you have these bigger phones, you cup them in your hand, and how much of the screen can you reach with your thumb as you hold it in one hand? And it's so much harder with the Max models. Now, Jason prefers the mini, so he comes from a perspective of really liking smaller phones. But so I was sort of playing around with this case yesterday afternoon, and
You've been
it's like
fondling the case. Okay, nice. That's
I've been
nice.
sort of seeing what does it feel like, and I was realizing
Right.
that even with my current iPhone Pro, I can't reach the entire thing with my thumb, of course, and you often have to
True.
put the
Yeah.
iPhone in the other hand and touch it.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
I think it's going to be okay. We'll see. But the reason to make it is because there's a big new feature. Well, first of all, I've always been curious about having a Max phone just to see more words on the screen. When you're
Yeah.
using that as a device, it's a little bit more like an iPad than an iPhone. So I've always been curious about it, but it has this new telephoto lens, which is really interesting
Yeah.
because it has there's so many camera improvements that I want to talk about, but the
Yeah.
main difference between the Pro and the Pro Max is instead of a 3x telephoto lens, you have a 5x telephoto
Yeah.
lens.
Okay.
So
Well,
when I'm
okay. I want
recording
to
my
get to that. I
daughter,
want to get to that. I want to get to that in just a minute, Jeff.
okay,
But I just want to say quickly a couple of things on this. The
yeah,
titanium, to be clear, even though I said at the beginning that it may not have been as exciting, Apple's going to get my money. Like, I'm definitely
yeah,
upgrading from my iPhone 14 Pro to the 15 Pro. And that really just underscores your comment there, because even though it is fairly incremental upgrades or changes, I'm there.
yeah.
The titanium, honestly, to be that is one of the biggest things that I was excited about, specifically from the weight aspect, because I have an iPhone 14 Pro, Jeff. My wife has an iPhone 12, not a Pro, just
Mhm.
a 12. Jeff, when I picked that thing up, her iPhone 12, I'm like, is this a feather? Like, honestly, it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
so much lighter than mine. And if the kids, my daughter also has a 12, if she picks up my iPhone 14 Pro, she's like, oh my goodness, this is like picking up a brick. This is insane. I don't think about it all that much because I'm not comparing them. But if it is this much, just like I've seen Jason Snell mostly and others that pick up, and even though it's just 10%, 9 to 10% lighter, I'm like, give it. I'm like, that to me is amazing. Now, quickly, you alluded to this just a little bit. There is a slightly different size to the iPhone 15 Pro from the
Mhm.
14 Pro, right? To where one of the thoughts that I always have in this is, wait a minute, are my current iPhone 14 Pro cases gonna fit
Right.
on the 15 Pro? And I don't think they're gonna fit as
They don't.
snugly anymore. Okay.
And the reason
Oh
for that,
man,
Brett,
come
is
on.
because I mean, it's a good thing. There is a
Yeah. Okay.
smaller
Good.
bezel.
Good.
What Apple would prefer in a perfect world, it would be a complete screen to screen bezel. The screen would go from edge to
True.
edge.
True.
There would be no bezel at all. The bezel on the 15 Pro is smaller than the 14 Pro. And with a smaller bezel, Apple could have
Okay.
done two
Okay.
things. They could have made the display size a little bit bigger. So like the size of the device would be the same and the display would be bigger.
Right.
But instead,
Right.
what they opted to do was keep the display size exactly the same and use the smaller bezel to bring in the sides a tiny bit and bring in the top. Now, it's a tiny difference. I mean, we're talking,
Mm,
you really would
yeah.
have to have one on top of the other to
Right.
see it, but it is enough that cases are not
I
going to
gotta get
work.
my case.
Or
Yeah.
anything else that you may have. I'm trying to think of what else besides a case people might own that's like form fitted for the actual width or the
Yeah.
height.
Yeah.
That's going to
I think
change.
it's mostly the
That's going to change.
cases.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about not just the cases you and I talk about, because again, Apple will get more money from me just for an Apple case, because I really have enjoyed those. But some people have the the 12 South book, or they have like wallets that you
Mhm.
see that they fit in. Like, I
Mhm.
think some of that, I mean, you could try it and see, but I like that snug fit on there, and that's going to be interesting. Just real quickly, one of the stories you linked to just before we move on the titanium side, this was my favorite post from Dr.
Yeah.
Drang, who's an engineer. And I don't know that if I ever even thought about this, but apparently some people like Dr. Drang did, in the sense that if it's titanium, is that going to pose a health issue? But I'm very thankful that Dr. Drang informs us the titanium is Ti6Al4V. It's
Oh,
the
good. That's the
garden
one that I
variety.
prefer.
Well, it's the garden variety alloy, he says, of course. It's a great material, but not exotic in any way. Not that I would even know, Jeff. But here's the thing that sets me at ease. Apart from many aerospace applications, very nice, it's also used in medical implants. So that the skin contact with the titanium won't be a problem. Thank
Right.
you, Dr. Drang. That puts me at ease.
And again, you've been
Good
using
stuff.
titanium on your Ultra for a while now, right?
Uh-huh.
So you know that it's
Exactly.
okay to have skin contact and stuff. So,
Lots of
so anyways,
skin contact, because I wear this thing all the time. Okay, just wanted to say that about titanium. Moving on, you were getting ready to talk about
let's
the
talk about the camera
camera.
because that's what we're starting to talk
Yes.
about. And I'll circle back around to the telephoto lens. But what makes me really excited about this is the way that they are using the camera that they have. The 14 that I got last year,
Oof.
when
So
I
good.
did my review of it, I took some
Yeah,
pictures that were sort of looking at some things that were far away
I
outside,
remember. Yeah, I'm
and
going to bring it
I
up.
showed the
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
between looking at it with the I guess what would it the 13, right? Yeah, here's just
yeah.
like yeah, look at the one that's got the top
There
of
it
it, that one
is.
right there that's got the tops.
Yeah,
You can
the World War
see
II
compared to those
museum.
two,
Yeah,
the difference
yeah,
between a 12 megapixel image
yeah.
and a
Wow.
48 megapixel picture image. You can see a lot more detail. And for
Yeah,
years now, the iPhone's default camera has been
yeah.
12 megapixels. And so
Right.
for folks watching the video right now, where you can go look at the old post, I mean, that's a clear night and day difference between 12
Absolutely.
and 48. But the problem is, as a practical matter, for the last year that I've had my iPhone 14 Pro, I haven't used 48 megapixel very often, because you have to go into the raw mode, and dealing with raw
Yeah.
pictures is a little bit more
Right.
of a pain. And so what I really wanted to just have it was built into the normal iPhone mode, which used to be JPEG and is now something called HEIF, but HEIF easily translates into JPEG. So
Right.
it's a more reasonable file size, unlike raw pictures, which are just so ridiculously huge. And so what Apple's done this year is two things. First of all, no longer is the default 12 megapixel. Now on all of the new iPhones 15s, including just the regular ones, non-Pro ones, it's now 24 megapixel. They're still using a 48 megapixel camera, but they
Oh,
are
interesting.
basically downsampling that to 24 so that the file sizes aren't quite as big. And if you have a really good 48 megapixel image, you can, get a fantastic 24 megapixel image from it, just by sort of taking the best of every other pixel and however they put it together. And so you get what should be excellent quality 24 megapixel images. So all the new iPhones are going to appreciate that. And then, of course, if you want to turn on the mode, and you can make this your default mode for always, you can say, you know
Hmm.
what? I'm okay with bigger file sizes, take up more space on the phone. That's fine. I want to have 48 be my default all the time. And if you turn that on, and I'm going to have to play around and see how much of a difference I see in real life, but the end result is, instead of your default pictures being 12, your default pictures will be 48 megapixels with all of the
Okay.
other special sauce that Apple uses to
Wow.
make pictures look good. And so the potential is you can have like a lot more detail in these pictures, so that in the future, when you're looking at these things years from now on even larger and larger screen TVs and everything else, the end result is that your memories will be sharper and better. So I'm very
Right.
much excited about that. So that's
But the
one big change.
certainty is those are going to be larger pictures,
They
right?
will. They'll take
Which
up
I
more
know is
file
something else that
size.
you mentioned at the bottom of your post here. Not only are you getting the max, but you're maxing
Yeah.
out a little bit more on the storage space on there, because you know that these pictures are going to be a little bit bigger.
Yeah. And not just pictures, but videos too, for the same
Right.
reason. So, and that takes up so much space. So I decided to, instead of getting the 256, to get the 512. I recommend that most people get 256. I think it's enough space for most people. And
Right.
whenever people ask me, I say, try not, the 128 is a little small for, if you're going to use it a lot, but 256 is a great, perfect size. But I decided to go a little bit bigger with 512, and we'll see if that ends up being overkill or not. I'll let you know a year from now if it's too much space. But then
You're
I
in
was,
good company. Yeah, Ben
yeah.
Lovejoy at 9 to 5 Mac is doing the same thing. You link to his
Oh, yeah,
story
yeah.
as well.
Same
Just
thing
be
for the
simply
same
because,
reason.
again, it's the camera. So we you talked about the bigger size. I've done a max size before, and I just did not enjoy it. I'm going to get the 15 Pro regular, normal
Mhm.
size, normal hand size, I guess.
Yeah.
But I am probably going to bump it up, just like to what we were talking about, to the storage, just because I've been 256 as well, just like you. But I probably will get a little bit more. But I don't get the 5X telephoto, which I think you're going to talk about here as
Yeah,
well,
you
right?
get
I
the
don't get
3X.
that in the
Now,
regular Pro,
which
right?
is still nice. And so here's the question that I have. If for getting closer to the action, and this is why I'm really excited to try this new lens. And, I think about things like, my daughter's playing basketball or something, and you want to
Right.
get tight in. Right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
because I'm sitting in the stands, there's a limit to how tight I can get. I can
True.
use a digital
Yeah.
zoom to get tighter, but then it's going to
Right.
be blurry. So being able to move into a 5X, which is the equivalent of like a 120 millimeter for
Wow.
folks that think about, regular telephoto lenses on like SLR cameras. That's going to be a nice zoom that I'm really looking forward to using. Now, here's something that I had not thought about until earlier this week. Like I said, I was talking to Jason Settle on this panel thing that he was on, and he says, here's the question that he has. So the regular camera, you've got the 3 cameras in the Pro. The regular camera we know is this 48 megapixel camera, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
the change between that regular camera and a 5X telephoto is actually pretty substantial, which means that when you start using the 5x camera, well, that's going to be great because it's an optical zoom. But what if you're taking a picture that's not 5x zoomed in, but instead is
Okay.
like a 4x or a 3x? With the 3x on an iPhone Pro is going to be fine because that's what their telephoto is made for. But if
Right.
you're trying to get about a 3x on the Pro Max, it's going to have to be sort of interpolating that from the regular camera, which means it's going to be a certain degree of digital zoom. Now, they're
Hmm.
going to probably have some blending between the center part of the image that maybe they could use the 5x for, but the end result is, is it possible that if you wanted to take a 3x zoom picture, you're actually going to get a much better result on the Pro
Huh.
versus the Pro Max? I don't know. And in everyday use, am I going to find that 3x zoom is the sweet spot, or am I going to actually prefer 5x zoom? These are all interesting questions that none of us will know until we have them in
We're
our
not going
hands.
to
It's
know.
just,
Right.
it shows
Right.
that there's no one easy answer. There's no one, this is absolutely the best option type thing. So I'm very, very curious to start trying this, and I will soon, but it'll be interesting to have some new stuff. And then, so on top of all of that, Apple,
Yeah.
just to sort of finish the story, they've done all sorts of little nips and tucks to make the images better. It's better at low light. It's better at a million different things. So, every year the cameras get better,
Yeah.
naturally,
Not.
just through their
Yeah.
science. And so,
Not just in the software, but in the hardware as well. The Apple's made up word of the day was Tetra Prism. I don't know if it's made up or not. I've just never heard that. But we have been talking about like a periscope lens that we have seen in some Android phones, but Apple did not say that word at all this past Tuesday. But they did say Tetra Prism, as you quote here, to bounce the light off of a couple of right angles inside the hardware, like mirrors inside, right, to achieve this effect. Interesting stuff there.
Yeah, so instead of having a longer periscope, I guess tetra means four, right? So it's going to be bouncing off four times
Right.
to take up a little bit less space, but still get the illusion of a longer chamber to get that telephoto image on the. And again, this is just on the Pro Max. This is not on the
Right.
Pro.
Right. Okay. So titanium. Camera improvements as usual. What else do we? It's an upgraded processor. Like it's going to be faster, better, faster, speedier.
Yeah, and just to pause on that, it uses
Yeah,
a 3 nanometer processor. I mean, I'm not a chip designer, and you're not either, Brett. But in
that
the
is correct.
industry, 3 nanometer has, I'm told, that has long been sort of like a holy grail of, can we actually get there?
Right,
Intel's not
right.
there yet, but Apple is. They now are in the iPhone, and you have to, we're going to soon be and get there on the computer chips as well. So this is supposedly a big deal. The reason that it's better to have a smaller chip is that everything's closer to each other, so the communications within the chip can be even faster. So we'll see in real life how much we see from an A17 Pro, but things should, not only should things be faster, but it also enables more sophisticated computations, which allows for features that weren't even possible before, like some of those photography features and some of the new things that Siri is going to be able to do and stuff like that. So
it's always about responsive. Yeah, it's always about responsiveness for me, Jeff. Like, honestly, if we do things day after day, like opening up my Safari browser, I get to the point where I don't care about any animations. I don't care about, like what it looks like as it pulls up, or I just want it to, as quickly as possible, get to the task that I want to do. And I think if I were a chip processor engineer, I would have nerded out on the fact that they were talking about this 3 nanometer. They kind of just, well, I don't want to say buried it, but it's like, for the public facing aspect of September of this past Tuesday, the vast majority of the public isn't going to care about all the techie nerdy stuff, right? They just wanted to know that it's going to be faster.
Right.
But you're right. I don't want to bury that aspect because it just seems, but at this point, not only does it seem like this is the next evolution, I'm just expecting Apple to completely run away with this from the technology standpoint. I mean, truly, they just seem with Apple Silicon, we don't even know because it's not an open aspect like maybe we could see some of the aspects in Intel or AMD or whatever. But Apple just seems to be running away with this, and it's pretty amazing that it's continuing on that. Oh, one of the other things quickly we didn't even talk about on the camera. We talked about more of the pictures, the image, but like the spatial video aspect. I think was it Jason Snell that said this? Like the new Apple iPhone 15 Pro can record spatial video that you can't even look at on the actual iPhone. I mean, you can see it, but you won't see the entire spatialization of the video, because that, of course, will be reserved primarily for the Vision Pro when that comes out next year.
I mean, it's interesting when you think about the two cameras on the back of your iPhone, they're really pretty close to each other, right? I mean, they're maybe a half an inch apart, maybe they're not that far apart. Is that going to be far apart enough to actually capture a 3D image? Apparently Apple thinks the answer is yes, but I love the idea. Spatial video is one of those features that when the Apple Vision Pro headset comes out next year, people say that it is, everyone that has tried it says, you don't know, like you seriously, this is really, really, really good. Looking at your home videos in 3D makes them so much more lifelike. So, and of course you can take those while you're wearing the headset, but then you look like a dork because you're wearing a headset when you're interacting with your family. So, but using an iPhone to take pictures makes so much more sense. So I think it's great that they brought this feature to the iPhone. I hope it works well. I also love the idea that you can start taking these spatial videos with your iPhone now, even if it's going to be 5 years, even longer before you even own a Vision Pro. Because as I said in my article, it's akin to, I remember when my kids were really young, I bought some of the first HD video cameras. They used tape, they were aggravating to deal with. It wasn't part of my phone, it was something separate, but I knew at the time that I was preserving memories that the kids are never going to be 1 year old again, right? And so
of course
you want and as I look back at those home videos now, I'm so happy that I wasn't recording them in VHS-C or something like that, because when I look at my older videos from the 90s and the 80s, gosh, they just look so bad on a big TV, on a modern 4K, 60-inch television. They really look pixelated. So it's always nice to future-proof things by taking advantage of these new technologies today, so that when you look at stuff 10 years from now, you'll be like, oh, I'm so glad that I got that video, that birthday party in 3D. So
let's talk buttons.
Okay.
Buttons on the iPhone haven't changed very much at all.
Really?
In fact, some of the buttons haven't even changed since 2007, right? I think some of the first iPhones had what I usually call like the mute switch or the silent switch, right? That little clicker on the side. I mean, that's been around for decades now, right? I mean, a long time. Yeah. And so we've never seen that really used for anything else other than it's a very quick and convenient way to silence your phone quickly. But if you get an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max, that button is going to be a button now, not a switch anymore.
Yeah. And more importantly,
I want to see what this is going to be like. I don't know yet. And I hear people talking about it, but it's going to be interesting.
And I love that you'll be able to assign different functions to it, because I talk to so many people that keep their iPhone in the silent mode all the time. They don't want the phone ringing while they're at work. They don't, let it vibrate, and I'll decide if I pick it up or not. And I'm the same way. So I don't use that switch very often. But why not have something put there that I would use a lot? And so now it's a button that you press in or not. You hold it down the button for a second, and you can control what happens when you hold down the button. And there's really endless options, because although Apple has some built-in things like turning the flashlight on or taking a picture or or something like that, you can also connect it to a shortcut and use the shortcut app to do just about anything. So if you want to say, like, in my home, every time I press this button, I want the lights in my living room to go on or off. You could do that if you wanted to, or whatever function you wanted. So I think that's really cool that you can decide what you do with the action button. You, Brett, have an action button on your Apple Watch Ultra, but there's one of the complaints I've heard, and I think I've heard you say this too, is that there's only a few different things you can connect it to. So a lot of people just connect it to the flashlight, which is fine, but want it to be more exciting. But with the iPhone, you'll be able to connect it to endless things. So it's sort of like who knows what the future will be. I'm sure people are going to come up with all sorts of neat usages that I will read about. I'm like, oh, I'm going to try that too. So I love it.
Exactly.
It's a great idea.
I do like having that immediate switch. And I got to tell you, that's going to be some muscle memory that will have to be retrained a lot, because I constantly switch that off and on probably every day, depending on I don't like mine being silent all the time, but I hear the same thing, Jeff. Most people just leave it on silent. My wife does that. She has it always on silent, so you never hear it. And she has an Apple Watch, so she can get some notifications that way. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I have to confess, I don't really use the action button on my Apple Watch all that much. And again, I think it's not because I don't like it or because I have that complaint necessarily. I'm probably just not used to it. Like I have to I have to intentionally think about, hey, I've got that action button. I can use that to turn on the flashlight, other than going to the home screen on my Apple Watch and flipping up and going to the flashlight that way. Like that's the way I've always done it, and really, it's just more of a muscle memory than anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've covered most of the big things on the iPhone, although I know there's always many, many more. But
Well, but we
one of
should
the
say, Brett,
last
before you
things,
move on,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, we've been talking about the Pro the whole time, but let's just say that if you don't get the Pro line, the iPhone
Yes,
15, it actually has a number of new
excellent.
features. Many of
Yeah,
them are things that were on the Pro last year that are now part of the main line, like the same processor and some of those other features, the dynamic island. So they may not be as exciting to me and you, Brett, because we've been using these features for a year. But
true,
if
true.
you're a non-Pro user, I just want to say
Yeah.
that the new iPhone 15, it's got a lot to offer too, and I'll just leave it at that. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I thought about that because I think most people listening to us probably do tend to like, hey, we'll pay a few extra dollars to get the
Mhm.
Pro just because we like to have all those extra features. But that is a huge thing. I'm so used to the dynamic island now. That's one of the things that just it has just been fully integrated into my life. Like I can't imagine using an iPhone without a dynamic island now. And I used to get used to that because of iPhone 14 Pro. But when I go to my wife's phone, I'm like, why can't I get quick access to that? Like, I can't even imagine not having that. But you're right. The fact that that now is going to be available in the iPhone 15 non-pro model, that was huge, and I'm thrilled. Most of the thing is, the vast majority of people listening to us would probably get along just fine with a non-pro iPhone. But if you do want to upgrade, that's what most people do. That said, exactly what you said, that the iPhone 15 non-pro is going to really be an amazing device in and of itself. That's great. Okay, last thing quickly that we talked about and predicted, along with everybody else, not like we had a crystal ball, USB C. So
Yes.
this was the first iPhone that has gone now from the Lightning port for charging to USB C. And if I'm not mistaken, this is not just Pro. This is all the 15 models. Is that
Correct.
correct, Jeff?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So get ready, buckle up. You're going to
Yeah.
have to probably be buying some new cables to charge your phone.
Yeah, it looks like Apple is, and you say this is not just the Pro, this is the iPhone, and it's not even just the iPhones. Apple is apparently ditching Lightning across the entire line. So you can
Yeah.
no longer buy a new iPhone. You can still buy the old iPhones because they're not changing, what they've already made. So if you go back and go into the Apple store and spend less money to get an iPhone 13, of course it's going to have Lightning. But for any new product that they sell, whether it's be the new phones, we'll talk in a second about new AirPods Pro. I mean, they have moved completely to USB-C. And we know that they're
Yeah.
partially doing it, maybe even largely doing it, because the European Union said that all new phones starting next
Yeah.
year have to
Yeah.
use USB-C. But it does mean that there's all sorts of implications. I mean, you've just brought up this article from the New York Times from Brian H. Chen,
Yeah.
where he says that the
Good.
nice thing about USB-C is you don't have to pay the Lightning tax. If a third party sells you a Lightning
Yeah.
cable, if you go to a company like Anchor, because Lightning is an Apple-owned standard, they have to pay some money to Apple for the license. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
USB-C is an open standard, so anybody, I mean, you and I, Brett, we could start Jeff and Brett's USB-C store and start making our own cables. And then the question is going to
The
be,
domain.
are we making high-quality products, or are we making things as cheap as possible to try to, get sales for
Right.
the low end? And this is what this article warns against: is you can go on Amazon right now and you can get a USB-C cable for like $4 or $5, but the quality is going to be incredibly questionable.
Right.
And
Right.
if it's you hate to use, I always get nervous if you're in like a hotel and you see a charging thing, you're like, gosh, I don't know if this is a high quality thing or if it's going to
Right.
cause my iPhone to short out. And so he's just warning you, now, good news is you can get lots more options, but you get what you pay for. So get something that's
Absolutely.
going to be a decent quality from a company that you can trust. Apple, of course, would be happy to sell you USB cables, but they're always super, super expensive. They always work great because the quality is fantastic. But
Right.
I often find that for things like cables, you can find a third-party company that's trustworthy and get something that has more features for less money. So it's a brave new world we're going to be in with USB-C, and it's going to mean that you need new chargers. I mean, I was thinking, Brett, next to my bed, I
Right.
have a place where I charge my iPhone every night with
Right.
a Lightning charger. So I'm going to have to
Yep.
change that when I get the new phone. So it is going to be some changes, but I think in the long run, it's going to be better.
So I could not find where this might or may not be confirmed, but are the new iPhones going to ship with a USB-C cable in the box? Do you
I
know
think
at all?
I think the answer is yes, that you're going to
Okay, I
get
think so too.
a USB-C to USB-C cable. You're not going to get the
Okay,
charging brick. So
right.
just like before, you're going to have to get your own USB-C charging brick if you don't have it. But I think they're going to have a cable. However, the cable that they're shipping is going to be a 2.0 quality cable,
Right.
which
That's
means
where I
for
was going.
charging, it's
Right.
fine. It's going to be fine for
Yeah.
charging. But for the purposes of speed, if you're connecting it to a computer and you want to transfer like a video, it's going to be the same speed as Lightning, which is 480 max megabits per second or whatever. Whereas one of the advantages of the Pro is that it can support the USB 3 standard, which supports up to 10 gigabits per second transfer speed. So it's
Okay.
like 20 times faster. And so this is, I've mentioned this last week that I was excited about
Yeah.
USB-C because when I take
Yeah.
high definition videos with my iPhone and I want to move them onto my Mac at home so I can edit them in Final Cut Pro, it
Right.
takes, I mean, I usually have to wait until the next day and let the videos transfer overnight because if
Right.
I plug a
Right.
cord in and I try to transfer them, it just takes so long. But if you have a cable that supports 3.0 speed, the 10 gigabits speed, 10 gigabits per second speed,
Yeah.
then you can
Yeah.
actually transfer so much faster. And I actually went ahead and bought one of those, Brett. Apple doesn't sell one right now. They used to. What they sell right now is a
Interesting.
USB 4 cable, and it's like
Okay.
$70. So it's a little overkill for the new iPhones because it goes so much faster. I found one. There's a company called Pluggable, which is a reputable company. They have
Yep.
all sorts
Yep.
of testing and stuff like
Exactly.
that. And they had one on Amazon for $12, and it looked like a good enough one that's got the speed. And so that way, I'm going to have this hooked up to my computer at home. And if I want to transfer videos, I figured for $12, that's worth it to just transfer videos at a high speed. Now, the one that I purchased maxes out at 10 gigabits, so it's fine for this year's iPhone Pro. Next year, I mean, who knows? This is just speculation. Maybe next year's iPhones will go up to 20 gigabits per second on the Pro models. And if they do, well,
Oh,
then this
interesting.
cable is going to be limiting me to 10. But I figured for at least $12 for a year, $1 a month, that's fine. I don't mind spending that. So, but
Okay.
it gets
Well, thanks for
complicated. So
explaining that.
every
Yeah,
USB-C
I know.
cable is not the same. You need to read the
Right.
box closely. What speeds does it have? What power delivery does it support? Is it a reputable company? Is it going to fry my
Yeah.
phone?
Yeah.
It does put a lot more onus on the consumer. Whereas in the old world, where everything had to be certified by Apple for Lightning, at least you knew that if you bought
You're
an
right.
Apple certified, made for iPhone cable, you knew it was going to be good quality. So,
Well, I'm glad you explained all this. And this was a great article from Brian Chen at the New York Times, like you mentioned, just because, I mean, we've talked about this many times. You get what you pay for. So it's just really, first of all, the quality of it, right? And he even goes into a little bit of the detail of like the circuitry that's inside the USB C. And he says not all USB C cables are created equal. But I think there's a quality standpoint. And then what you've already just been quickly describing, which has made my head hurt. Well, before you explained it was like the different speeds of the
right.
USB-C cables, right? It's like you said, the 2.0, which apparently is fine for charging, but if you want to have high speed file transfer, then you need a USB-C 3.0. Well, this one you purchased, they even say, oh, it's USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type C. It's so confusing. Even my wife is like, she goes USB, and I'm like, well, what is it, USB A or C? Because it's to your point. It's like she goes, I need a charging brick, and I'm like, okay, what do you need, USB A or C? She's like, I don't know, it's USB. I need a USB cable. Like
Yeah.
most people aren't going to take the time to. They just want something that works, and that's why I was asking here. I think overall, in fact, I'm fairly confident overall, this was a very good move, Jeff. Whether regardless of why Apple did it, and I think they just mostly it is that European rolling. But I think overall it's going to be fine. We're going to have some speed bumps as we go through this, for people figuring this out. But again, it's nothing like we've seen in the past. The Lightning cable was ultimately a very good move for Apple to get away from that, huge 30-pin connector that we know now. And I think going to USB-C is going to open up, I think, a lot of awesome opportunities, just because it's a little bit more of an open standard on this. But just know, if nothing else, just make sure you're going to have to pay a little bit extra for the Lightning cables. Don't get the $3.99 cables, as you check out of 7-Eleven with the Slurpee or something. It's like you need to get something from Apple Store or something like that. Woo. Okay, but the last thing quickly, you already alluded to this, and we talked about this at least a couple of weeks ago, is there are still some Lightning cable devices that I use every single darn day, Jeff. And I was wondering, is Apple going to get rid of them? And the answer is yes. I wish they would have just upgraded them, but they're just stopping selling the MagSafe battery pack, which you and I both very much enjoy. I carry that with me constantly, and I probably still will, and still carry a lightning cable just for that. But also another product I use is the MagSafe Duo. In fact, I leave that next to my bedside table and use it constantly. Use as a lightning cable. I will probably still carry a lightning cable just to have access to that as well. But curiously, if you don't have one already, you ain't going to get one now unless you can find one, used somewhere.
Maybe in the future, 6 months, a year down the road, Apple will bring them back and add some new feature, and it'll support USB-C. But for at least now, you can't buy them from Apple anymore.
Well, this even underscores, I don't know if I've heard this from a whole lot of people, but one of the rumors was that if Apple doesn't go to USB-C, maybe they'll just go full wireless. And that is still an option, and I am still trying to invest a little bit more into the wireless options for charging my phone. And so here, you relate to a story on The Verge about Qi, which is QI, right? But we say Qi, and the Qi 2 standard. I don't think it's quite ready to roll out yet, but some suspect that the iPhone 15 is going to support Qi 2 charging. Maybe it should be coming, I think.
I haven't seen if Apple's officially stated this or if it's just articles like The Verge that are seeing it. It must be something that Apple officially stated. But again, the word official is in quotes because I don't think the Qi 2 standard is announced yet. The one thing that I know about Qi 2 is that the existing Qi standard has a problem because if you don't put your device on top of the charging stand at the right angle, you might think it's being charged, but it's actually not. And that's the big advantage of MagSafe. MagSafe has those magnets, so it's charging because the magnets align it to the exact, and you can hear it snap into place. So it's a good thing. And Apple, it's such a good thing that Apple took the MagSafe thing that it developed and invented, and it donated it to the Qi consortium. So one of the advantages of Qi 2 is that it will support something that, for all intents and purposes, is MagSafe. They won't use the word MagSafe, but it'll be the same thing that we already know and love. There may be some other new things about Qi 2 too. I haven't heard if like the transfer speed's faster or something like that. But whatever it is, apparently the new iPhone 15s are going to support that. And the main reason I say this is more of a future-proofing thing, whether it's 6 months away or a year away, at some point we will see products that advertise that they are Qi 2, and they will unmistakably be regular than the current Qi products. The nice thing is this iPhone will be ready for it when that day comes. So you'll have more options in the future, which is good.
Okay, lots on the iPhone, and I think deservedly so. That was what Apple spent a lot.
And we haven't even touched all the features yet, but let's move on.
I know, but we'll weave them in a little bit more as we go through. But why don't we move to one of the other announcements? I'm only hesitating because it's like, really? Like, I thought we were going to get a little bit more on the Apple Watch. There is a new model. Well, two new models, right? The Series 9 and also the Apple Watch Ultra 2. You had a good post that you already went through and highlighted some of the things that they announced on Tuesday, Jeff.
Yeah. In fact, just to jump to the end, I own an iPhone, the Apple Watch Series 7. I did not upgrade last year to the Series 8 because although there were some nice improvements, for me, it's like it wasn't enough to justify buying it. And I just assumed that 2 years later, this year, I would buy the iPhone Series 9. But I'm not going to, even though it's got some nice new features.
Really? Oh, I didn't get that far.
I'm still loving my iPhone 7, and the new features are nice, but I think I'm going to wait one more year. And I will admit that I am biased by something that is perhaps unrealistic, which is never trust rumors, Brett. Don't trust rumors because they may all be wrong. There were rumors this year that the iPhone Pro Max was going to be substantially more expensive than past years. No, it's the same as ever.
Nope, same price.
But there is a rumor that next year, when the Apple Watch 10 comes out, that the number 10 is sort of a milestone, and so maybe there will be more of a radical design change. Now, Mark Gurman at Bloomberg has speculated about this. Who knows? So part of me is feeling like rather than get a new Apple Watch
you're
this
going to
year,
wait.
Maybe if I wait just one more year, it'll be a really good upgrade. But regardless, the reason I have thought about it is, although I've heard some people say that the Series 9 is not a huge improvement, but it really does have some nice new features in it. It's got the nice new processor, so it's going to be faster. They don't upgrade the processor every year for the Apple Watch. The original Apple Watches, you and I both remember, Brett, they were really slow, and so to the point where you could not really do some things with them. They were so darn slow. I feel like
Right.
when Apple came out with the original Apple Watch, they probably should have waited another year to get them a little bit
Yeah.
faster, but whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
nowadays, Apple Watches are more or less fast enough. It's even faster with the Series 9. And with that faster processor, it allows them to do more things that they really couldn't do effectively before. Like, for example, have this new gesture that if you're using, if you see an
Yeah.
alert on your screen and your other hand's busy, you've got something in your other hand, you can just do this double tap with your hand that has the Apple Watch on your arm, and it will interpret that as something similar to if you're on a computer, how if you hit the return key, it just automatically presses the default button.
Right.
It's the same idea. It'll press the default button, whether that be playing music or answering the phone or whatever it is. And we have all had situations where you've got something in your right hand, you see something in your Apple Watch, and you end up saying, well, I hate to do this, but I'm going to use my nose and I'm going to tap my phone with my nose because it's the only thing I have free. We've all done it before. But with this new gesture, you won't be able to do that. So a brand new gesture, that's pretty cool. A faster processor.
Well,
that's pretty cool.
Okay. I take umbrage with the brand new gesture, Jeff. Here's the thing, and you've seen this too, right? So this gesture, theoretically, I mean, it has been actually, we've talked about this. Apple has used this gesture and a few others in the accessibility settings of the Apple Watch. As soon as I saw this, Jeff, and Apple was touting this as like this amazing new way that you can interact with your Apple Watch, I'm like, wait a minute, you've already had that in there. In fact, it has been amazing for people that do need those accessibility features. Now, granted, I haven't turned it on and I don't use that, but you can do like a fist, right? And it'll recognize if you clench your fist, it has that recognize of like the double tap with your finger and your thumb. Now, I don't know anybody specifically personally that actually uses that a whole lot, but that has been in there. And the difference is I saw the video from Marquez. He was just saying that, it's a little bit more responsive. I mean, maybe with the newest, processor, it can just recognize that hand gesture a little bit quicker, but I kept looking at it like, wait a minute, that's not brand new, Apple. You've already done that, but for whatever reason they wanted to bring this forward as kind of a front facing feature that they're going to support now.
I hear what you're saying, but I disagree because on the old Apple Watches, to enable the accessibility feature, you have to put your Apple Watch into the entire accessibility mode. And for people that have a special need for it, that's great.
Okay.
But if all you want to do is just click the most obvious button by doing the double tap, that is not a feature that works with the old accessibility feature. Now, I agree that the gesture is the same, and that Apple has taken advantage of watching how this feature has been used for the last couple of years to fine-tune it. And that's what made them decide, as Marcus Brownlee says in his video, that with the new processor, it needed a little bit more oomph to get it reliably. So it's not just that it's going to be more reliable because of the processor, it's also that it's integrated into the system so that everybody, even people that don't have all the other accessibility features turned on, can use it. Because you can't literally go back in time, or just you can't literally take an older watch and turn on the accessibility setting and get the exact same feature that you get with the Series 9. So the other thing I was going to mention is in terms of the brightness, that it now, one of the cool things about your watch, Brett, is that your Apple Watch Ultra goes up to 2000 nits, and you tell me, but I understand that makes a big difference when you're outside, right?
Huge. Yeah. I've never had an issue as I used to with the older watches that I would look at it in the sunshine and not be able to see it. With this Apple Watch Ultra, I've never had an issue. And I have been in like some very sunny climes, and it has been fantastic to be able to see that exactly when I needed it.
So wouldn't it be nice if us mere mortals that just have a normal Apple Watch, if we had the same feature? And with the Series 9, you do get that. You get the 2000 nits on the Series 9. So, there's some other things too, like the ultra wideband chip and stuff like that. But just those things that we've talked about, a much brighter screen for when you're outside, more faster processor, and a new gesture. Hey, I mean, those are nice improvements.
Not bad.
And if you add that to the improvements that Apple had last year and the year before, and you're upgrading from an Apple Watch that's a couple years old, you put it all together, and it's a pretty big upgrade, even though I myself agree that this is not a huge upgrade year because, put my money where my mouth is. I'm not going to buy one yet, but I am envious of these new features. I would love to have the brighter Apple Watch. So
Well, you're putting your money where the rumors are. It sounds like, Jeff.
That's
But
right.
I got to tell you, I think you're onto something. You mentioned earlier on, like the iPhone X, right? The 10th anniversary of the 10th version of the iPhone, and how
Mhm.
different that was. I do think we've got something coming probably with because I remember we even talked about the fact that Apple with these Apple Watches may change the actual band connectors so that they could get more room. I mean, I almost kind of
Mhm.
liken that to like the 30-pin connector going to Lightning, right? It's like
Right.
the bands are fantastic because I could use I think I'm still using the watch band that I had with my first Apple Watch. So I can
Mhm.
still use it even with my Apple Watch Ultra. But I feel like those days are numbered. And I feel like maybe they weren't quite ready to go this year, but next year I think you're right. I think we're going to see kind of a new design, hopefully even thinner, probably lighter for the Apple Watch
Mhm.
next year. So for what it's worth, I think you're doing a good job on that. Just one last thing quickly, I wanted to mention that Marquez Brownlee talked about this as well, and others, that Siri will now operate locally on the Apple Watch. I think that's a pretty huge thing, Jeff,
Agreed.
because
Agreed.
I feel like now um, it's hit or miss. If I have my Apple Watch on, and I usually will put it really close to my mouth and invoke "She who shall not be named," but it sometimes will work and sometimes won't work on there, and sometimes my iPhone does it instead. Even if it's in the other room, for crying out loud, and I have to wait and see: did it actually hear what I said? Is it going to do what I asked to do? And even Marquez was talking about the fact that now that Siri is running, probably because of the newer processor, it's running on the Apple Watch itself, that it's going to be a little bit more responsive.
Yeah, that's a nice change. You don't have to wait for it to go to the network and interpret what you said. It will be able to do that on device. So yeah, another big change. And so then all of these new changes that we're talking about are also coming to the Apple Watch Ultra 2. And Brett, I'd like to get your take
Yeah.
on this because you use the Ultra, you know how awesome the Ultra is.
Yeah.
Everybody I know that has one loves them.
Yep. I
All of these
do.
new features we talked about, the double tap, the better Siri, the faster
Mm-hmm.
processor. I think it makes the Ultra 2 better. And I particularly would like to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on, we just talked about the brightness. This new Apple
Yeah.
Watch Ultra 2 goes up to 3,000 nits. That's the brightest
Three.
screen that
That's a
Apple has
lot more
made
nits.
in any. So what do you think? Yeah, I mean, what do you think about all these features?
Uh, I keep going back. When I saw it on Tuesday, Jeff, I'm like, that's not enough. Like that's not enough to push me over. Like I'm so happy with the Apple Watch Ultra. Like it's almost become, I will take it off my hand maybe for 40 minutes a day just to charge it up. But otherwise, I have it on all the time, and I love it. It's almost like, why would I upgrade my 14 Pro to a 15 Pro when it's just some incremental type of an upgrades, but yet I'm not going to
Mhm.
do Apple Watch 1 Ultra 1 to Ultra 2. It's just incremental upgrades. But it's not enough. I don't feel like it's not quite enough on there. Everything stays almost exactly the same. There's no new colors. Even, right, it's all the same titanium, but I love it. I probably would miss like the Siri thing we were just talking about, that it won't run locally on there. I'm sure I would enjoy the additional nits, so that it would even be brighter than it already is, but it's not enough. It's not enough,
Yeah.
Jeff. I don't think I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to
But
wait.
again, it would have been weird if Apple had added those new features to the Series 9 and not
Yeah,
added them to
agreed.
the Ultra, because the Ultra is the
Right.
best Apple Watch they sell. So if there's
Yeah,
somebody who has not yet purchased an Ultra, they will get to take advantage of all the things that you love
absolutely.
from what you
Yeah.
bought last year, plus some of these additional features too. The one thing that I'm really curious about is the brighter screen. I mean, as you said, Brett, you've been outside
Yeah.
in a really sunny day, and with
Yeah.
2,000 nits, you've been able to see the screen. I guess with 3,000 nits, it just becomes even easier to see the screen in a super brighty
I
day.
guess
Um,
so.
I
Get a
I guess
tan
Apple
from the
wouldn't have done
watch.
it if it wasn't an appreciable increase, so that an appreciable
True.
improvement.
Right.
So there must
Yeah.
be circumstances in which it really does make a difference. But then again, maybe it's on such edge cases, it would have to be such a sunny day that maybe the difference between 2,000 and 3,000 isn't that big. That's something I'm a little curious to hear what people that review them actually say.
Yeah.
Is it a difference? But again, you're not going to get an Apple Watch Ultra 2, but in a couple of
I
years when they
know.
have the Ultra
Yeah.
3 or the
Oh
Ultra
yeah.
4, eventually you
Oh
will
yeah.
upgrade. And whenever you
Definitely.
do, it'll be nice for you to take advantage of all these new features.
While the improvements for the Series 9 and the Apple Watch Ultra 2 aren't enough to get us to go to the new watch, the biggest announcement on Apple Watch from Apple was you're not going to be able to have leather bands anymore. Well, I
Yeah.
guess you can, but you ain't going to get them from Apple. This was a little bit bizarre. We can just quickly go into this because you linked to the Mother Nature video that Apple showed during the event, which I got to tell you, I know a lot of people have panned Apple, for having this show, and I'm not going to ruin the video. It's really, I thought it was amazing. I mean, it's the first time that I've seen really Tim Cook involved in some kind of a of a fun little video in that way. But the entire idea was just really to underscore, I thought fairly effectively, Apple's commitment to the environment. And I mean, there's all kinds of things wrapped up in that. They're going away from it's all electricity. All their stores electricity now. But one of the things that they emphasized was they're getting rid of leather in the Apple Watch bands that they're selling, even though I think they're still available now. I'm not really sure how that's going to go, but I thought that was interesting how they spent a long time on this.
Yeah, the environmental video first. You and I were both watching the keynote at the same time,
Right.
and when the video
Yeah.
started, I texted you and I said, "This is just way too corny." But I have
Yeah.
to
You said
admit,
corny. That's right.
I have to admit that I have changed my mind. That the
Oh,
video
okay.
was a fun way for Apple to show off what they're doing for the environment without being
Right.
too preachy of, let me give you a PowerPoint of the 10 things we've done differently. It
Right.
was a
Right.
fun
Right.
way
Right.
to
Right.
do it.
Right.
So
That's good.
when I watched the video a second time, I'm like, you know what? I actually think that was a good way to do it. And then as for leather, I mean, Apple is doing things across their product line, and leather's the same way.
Yeah.
Not only are they not going to sell leather watch bands, they're also not going to sell leather iPhone cases. And they've replaced
Yeah.
it with this new thing called and now I'm blanking on the name of it. What's it called? It's called
Fine woven.
Fine woven.
Fine
And actually,
woven.
I have it in my
Yeah.
hand because this new case
Oh,
that I purchased, normally this would have been the leather case, right? But this year
right.
they're not selling the leather case. So I'm actually holding in my hand right
Oh.
now a fine woven case. And I'll tell you, it feels pretty good. It's this sort of mesh technology. If somebody had given this to me and didn't tell me what the substance was, I would have probably guessed that it was leather because it's not 100% the same as the case that I bought last year, but it's pretty close. And
Is
it
it like
has
a pleather feel? Is it pleather or no, that's
it's
good
not
different?
pleather. I know what
Okay.
pleather is. It feels
Right.
soft. It
Okay.
feels sturdy. I'm sure it's more washable as a result. It feels good. And now this is a little bit
Okay.
stiffer
All
because it's
right.
part of a case. I know that
Right.
so it's probably got something inside of it to give it the stiffness. If it was part of an Apple Watch band, of course, it would be more flexible. But
Mm-hmm.
although I haven't touched any of the new fine woven Apple Watch bands, based upon the case that I'm holding in my hand right now, I suspect that they'll actually be
You're a
pretty
fan.
nice. So,
Okay.
so I
Okay.
say, and again, you don't have necessarily being a vegan, you can still enjoy your hamburger, but the
Right.
idea is that by not using leather, just the tax on the environment and carbon emissions and everything that's associated with getting to that leather product, it's just better to use something that's made of fabric. And so
Right.
why not
Right.
make that change too? So I'm actually, since what I'm holding right now feels so good, I'm in favor of that change. But as you say, other companies won't
Yeah.
necessarily do the same thing. So Apple will sell you an Hermes watch band, but the only Hermes watch bands that you can buy from Apple are the non-leather ones. But if you go to Hermes
Non-leather.
itself,
Yeah.
they are happy
Right.
to sell you their multi-$1,000 and
Like,
incredibly, well designed and very fashionable,
yeah.
but also very expensive leather bands.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I will leave the video to other folks watching, and then of course Apple has a huge press release on here about their unveiling its carbon neutral products. And again, yeah, I mean, it was a marketing piece, a little bit of fluff in there, and what Apple is doing. But on the other hand, they're one of the biggest companies that are really pushing the things that they're doing, and certainly I applaud on that.
Yeah, no, I don't want to get in
Now,
a soapbox, but when we
yeah,
greenhouse gas and everything else, we need to do something. And
right,
companies like Apple that have the resources to do something about it, it would be just as easy for them to not do this and to spend, the extra money into shareholder profit. But instead, they're saying, you know what, this matters to us. And I hope that other people follow their lead and don't just do
right,
it because they're forced to do it, but
right,
instead
right,
do it because it's the right thing to do, for our kids and our grandkids to have a better planet.
right.
So, I mean, of course, whenever somebody toots their own horn about it, people are going to say, oh, it's just marketing. And I guess there is a marketing aspect of it. It's just like
Sure.
Apple makes their phones, privacy is important to Apple because it's
Right.
important. But then they also use it as a
But they do
selling
something
point too.
about it.
But that
Right,
doesn't take
right.
away from the fact that it's also important to respect privacy.
Good
And
point.
so, kudos to Apple for doing this. Okay, enough said.
My favorite part is Tim Cook was rehearsing on how to welcome Mother Nature to the
I
Cupertino
You would
campus.
not think that Tim Cook would be an actor in a
I
comedic
didn't think so.
video,
He did
and
good.
yet he pulls it off. He actually
And
does pull it off
the
by
stare
making
down.
fun of
I mean, come
himself.
on.
He
Yeah.
makes fun of the fact that he doesn't have a sense of humor, or at least that's his persona. So
Right.
it's worth watching the video if you haven't seen it yet.
Okay, so with the iPhones going to USB-C, we already talked about the fact that Apple is now going to stop selling the MagSafe battery, the MagSafe charger that uses the lightning cables. So it sounds like they're going to stop selling the AirPods Pro because the charging case for the AirPods Pro has lightning. But no, in fact, this was kind of buried in the announcement on September 12th. And I got to tell you, this may worry me a little bit. I'm not really sure what I think about this because silently, deftly, I would even say, Apple released a brand new AirPods Pro version 2 that has a couple of slight improvements. We'll talk about that. But the biggest thing is the charging case is now USB-C. It looks exactly the same as my AirPods Pro with the Lightning, except that it's not a Lightning charging port in the bottom anymore. It's USB-C. I can't just buy a brand new USB-C charging case for my current AirPods Pro, Jeff. I would have to go and buy the entire set again for $250 on this. I'm not really sure what Apple is doing here. I think that they're future-proofing and preparing for what's to come, but this makes me a little upset. A little frustrated.
This is Apple, a company that has doing so many things right. This confuses me. Don't get me wrong. I agree that they should have AirPod Pros that work with USB-C. They should.
Right. Agreed.
I'm in support of that. But why didn't they call this the third generation? This is the part that I don't understand. Because if they had called it the third generation AirPods Pro, then people would say, oh, okay, the difference between the second and the third is you get USB-C. And as you alluded to, Brett, there's other features too. Like, if you're going to getting an Apple Vision Pro headset next year and you want to take full advantage of the sound when you wear AirPods, instead of just letting the Visions Pro headset has built-in speakers that are just right next to your ears. So if you want to wear AirPods, this is the one that you have to get. And so Apple has two products out there with the exact same name, AirPods Pro second generation, but there's completely different products. USB-C versus Lightning, works with the Vision Pro versus doesn't work with the Vision Pro. Apple, why are you doing this to us? Give the darn thing a new name, or put a plus at the end of it, or put a check, or do something to let people know that these are different products. I don't understand the naming convention. So I guess somebody at Apple thought that this made sense for some reason. And I hope that somebody explains it to me, and then I'll be like, oh, this makes sense. Because right now this makes no sense. Again, not the product itself. I'm happy to see the product, but just give it a different name. Don't call it the same thing.
So the official name, because this is on Apple's website right now, AirPods Pro second generation with MagSafe charging case, parentheses, USB-C.
I guess the USB-C is the new part.
That's the new part, I guess.
Call it the second,
I know.
Call it the third generation. Call it the second and a half generation. Do something like that. That's just bizarre.
So interestingly, they do not sell now the Lightning version of it, right? They did stop selling the Lightning version, but they just kind of silently threw in this USB-C version. And I'm in full agreement, Jeff. I'm glad that they did it, but I already have AirPods Pro. I'm happy with them. Like, why can't I just get the case? Like, I would just want to have a case because I'm not going to go and buy brand new ones, I don't think. I probably will at some point very soon. But it's like, I don't want to buy them new because I have perfectly good AirPods Pro. I love them. I use them every day. You would be using them too if you hadn't forgotten them at your house today.
That's why.
But it's like, exactly. So now it's the USB-C, and the only way that I can get the USB-C charging cable is to buy a brand new pair of AirPods Pro. And again, I love them so much, I probably will do this very soon, but it's like, why are you having to do this? But I see. Now, to be fair, not only the upgrade for the Vision Pro, which is that's the future proofing of it, but now the AirPods Pro have additional IP54 rated dust resistance for both the earbuds and the charging case. I like that. I don't know if it's quite enough to get me to upgrade immediately, but okay. Anyway, I feel like this is going to be the most frustrating thing that people are going to be talking about on there. Other than the fact that if you do have a USB-C charging case for your AirPods Pro and you have an iPhone 15 Pro, you can actually charge your charging case for the AirPods Pro from your iPhone. Am I correct in that? Is that I think they showed the slide about that you could have a USB-C cable from your iPhone to your AirPods Pro charging case, and it would charge the charging case. So it's
Yeah.
like, well, what do I want less? Do I want less battery on my AirPods or less battery on my iPhone? I feel like I have to pick one way. I want them both to be charged, but anyway, I guess in a pinch that could be a nice thing to do
Exactly.
if you needed to. Okay. Wow. I know this has been a long, but not only were we going to have new hardware by next week, because by next Friday, right, your shipment should be arriving. Am I correct?
Should be,
yeah, it could be there. Next Monday, September the 18th, is when Apple is going to release iOS 17. So even if you have a current iPhone, you're not going to get the newest iPhone. You will be able to download iOS 17 for your iPhone and iPad OS 17 for your iPad. We don't have to talk too much about this, Jeff, because I know we've been talking about it quite a bit, but I'm glad to know it's coming as soon as Monday.
Can't wait to play with it. Look forward to talking with you about it next week. So that's all I have to say.
That's all we have to say about that. Where you at segment? Real quick, we got a neat one. This was really interesting story here. We've talked about how great it is for the iPhone 14 Pro to be able to dial emergency services through satellite, but I've never heard of an emergency butt dial situation. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened. This was really a great story here from John Cook on Geek Week that I really want everybody to go and read, just simply because it's interesting in the fact that where he was and where they were going at the time. And it sounds like, Jeff, he just threw his iPhone 14 Pro into his backpack, right? I don't think he turned it off. He left it on. But he just put it in his backpack because they were hiking, right? They were having fun in the outdoors. But somehow, some way, he says, and here he hasn't been able to figure out, that the iPhone called emergency services. It somehow felt that somebody was in danger. And sure enough, they had law enforcement out there. They had a helicopter flying around trying to find him. And it just so happened he thought about, could it have been my iPhone? And it was. And he only found out by taking it out of his backpack and looking it up. And then he had to apologize profusely to the emergency personnel that came out for him.
He calls us a butt dial, which is what we often call it, but he didn't actually sit on his phone and make it happen. What he thinks he did, and again, he's not sure how it happens because this person, he totally understands how iPhones work and stuff.
He knows,
the guy,
right?
He works for one of these sites, so he understands it. But he says that he thinks that he was just trying to turn off his phone, which you can often do by pressing the buttons on the side. And he thinks that he just triggered emergency services by pressing it with his hand without realizing it. And then he just stuck it into his little fanny pack that he was using as he hiked around. And then next thing you know, it's calling emergency services. So none of us want us to be in this situation. You mentioned just now that the satellite feature was with the 14 Pro. It's actually on all four models of the 14.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's on all four models of the 15 as well. So there's even more
right.
iPhones that are out there in the wild. This satellite SOS service can be a lifesaver. We've talked about that many times, but it might, just like anything else, it can also have false alarms if you trigger it by accident. So it is just something to be careful about. I thought it was interesting that the Rangers or whichever emergency folks he was talking to, he actually asked them afterwards. He's like, do false alarms like what I did this happen very often? And they responded that they do happen sometimes, but not very much, and that they thought that considering the number of times that they were able to rescue someone who needed help, it was worth it to have just a few circumstances in which somebody made a mistake. Now, he said, hopefully that won't increase over time, because you can imagine if you get too many false alarms, well, then it would be like the Chicken Little problem. But but it just shows you that, be careful that you've got a lot of power in your hand to call emergency services.
Yeah.
So just be cognizant of it should you ever be in a situation where you trigger it by accident.
And what did he say here? I'm trying to figure out, what did he ultimately come to as the solution? He said he turns the iPhone off completely, right? Which isn't ideal, because you want to be able to, to get emergency calls or something if you need them. But he said if you're going to put it maybe in your backpack or something like that, he turns it off completely, which means that the satellite call would not have happened, or it won't happen once the phone is off. But then you got to remember to turn that off, right? It's not like everybody's going to be able to do that every single time. Right. Yeah, interesting. All right, we all know about the health aspects of vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D. Just we didn't know that there was vitamin AirPods. As much as we like our AirPods, I saw this story the other day, and thank you to this nice young lady here that was very transparent in her TikTok video, saying that she had her AirPods in her hand, apparently. I don't know if she had vitamins in the other hand.
She did,
She
yeah.
wanted to take her vitamins, and she inadvertently popped the AirPod into her mouth and swallowed it, even though she admits that it was a little difficult getting it down. She had to drink a little extra water, but she took her AirPod as a vitamin instead of the actual vitamins.
Yeah.
Um, Apparently, everything came out okay. It turns out okay at the very end, because she tried to talk. She called around to several doctors, like, what should she do? And how do they say it here? Most people just say that that things need to run their course, as it were. But
let it
apparently, it
pass
turns out
naturally.
okay. Right.
Let it pass naturally was the advice. I mean, we laugh at this, there, but for the grace of God, hopefully this never happens to me, but I could almost imagine doing something silly like this.
I know.
So it's nice.
I think
that
she
it
was out
didn't cause
walking,
any.
right? And she had her,
Yeah.
she met a friend. And so, you take your AirPod out and you have it in your hand and you just don't think about it. But wow, you got to think about it. But apparently she turned out okay. So even if it does happen to you, things will turn out okay. All right. A quick message from our sponsor, SaneBox. Thank you for coming back and for working with us, SaneBox. This is really great, because I got to tell you, Jeff, since I have started using SaneBox, I know it sounds flippant to say it, but I can't imagine not using it at this point. It has become so nice for me to know that once I check my general mailbox, my inbox, that I know the emails that are there are the ones that I really want to see. And in fact, the only thing that I sometimes get perturbed about is that I go and check my mailbox and I see other messages there, before the split nanosecond that SaneBox works and shoves them into the other folder. And I'm like, I don't want to see those anymore.
That's funny.
But it does it so quickly that I can barely even know. But if you want to hear a little bit more about SaneBox, we have a URL that you can visit to get more information. SaneBox.com/in-the-news. SaneBox, sanebox.com/in-the-news. In fact, you can sign up for a free trial. You can get $25 credit toward a SaneBox subscription. I will tell you another thing that I know you have talked about and I hadn't used a whole lot, Jeff, with SaneBox, is the @Sane black hole folder.
Oh, great feature.
It sounds kind of ominous, and SaneBox is very good to point out this is not like a spam filter, which I like, because if there are certain emails or domains that I want to filter out through my spam filter, it takes me a few extra steps to go into my mail server, right? And I blacklist this domain or something along those lines. And many times I just don't have the time to do that. But there's some emails, I know you've said this before, that I wouldn't consider them to be spam, but they're like emails that I get maybe from an organization that I'm a member of, or I used to be a member of. And I don't need to see it as much. I'm not as active in that organization. And so I just simply say, have this email go to the Sane black hole. I can go into the Sane black hole at any time folder and I can look around, if I feel like once in a while, FOMO or something like that. But most of the time I never do. And it just takes care of these emails so that I just don't have to see them and worry about them and take a second out of my life to say, okay, I'm just going to delete that, right? It's already basically taken care for me and going into the Sane black hole. And I've been doing this now on several emails with the training aspect, which I know you're going to mention just quickly, but I like the Sane black hole amongst all of the other folders that I use with SaneBox. So thank you, SaneBox. That really just helps overall just to keep me a little more calm and less anxious when I'm checking my email. And to me, that is completely worth having the subscription.
Yeah, it really is transformative that when I sort of jump in my iPhone JD emails, it used to be every time I went in there, because I might go in once a day, I'd see 25 messages and I got to go through them. And again, some of these you're sort of junk and some of these, but nowadays when I go in there, there's like 2 messages and I can very quickly see if I have to do anything.
Boom.
And then later on, I'll go back and I look at my newsletters that were sorted out. I don't have to look at the Sane black hole stuff. Like you say, it's a legitimate merchant that I just no longer am going to buy anything from. So just, I could try to unsubscribe for their emails, but you never know if that's going to work. I just say, put it in the black hole and that way I'll never deal with them again. The feature of SaneBox that I like is how easy it is to train it, because it truly is as simple as if there's a company that, I don't need to see anything from this merchant anymore. I just take the email and I drag it into Sane black hole. And that's all you need to do. That's it. SaneBox is smart enough to say, because he put one email from this sender in Sane black hole, I'm going to do that going forward. And the reverse is true too. If you see something in your newsletter folder, Sane News, or your black hole folder, Sane Black Hole, and you're like, you know what? This is actually something that I no longer think is irrelevant to me. I actually want to see these in the future. You just take it and you drag it from that folder back into your inbox.
Yeah.
SaneBox on the back end sees that you did that, and it trains it that in the future it will keep them in your inbox. So it
Yeah.
like that's the easy. There's no settings or configurations or fiddly switches or anything like that. You just move it where you want it, and it starts doing it the same way going forward.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to talk about today. I'll mention one more thing. I was talking the other day with somebody who listens to our podcast, and he said that he was interested to try the service, but he thought it was called SAME, SAME box. But as you pointed out correctly, it's sane, like the opposite of being insane. It's SANE.
That's
N
right.
as in nickel, SANE box, BOX is the name of the company. So check it out if you're interested in having a lot less chaos and a lot more, just easy email. And we all deal with so many emails. Who wants emails to be worse than they are? So it's a great service. Check it out.
Yeah, you're right. I just think of it. It keeps me sane with dealing with my mailbox. I can stay sane as opposed to insane. And so if, again, more information, go to sanebox.com/in-the-news. And again, you can get a free trial. You can stop it at any time and everything will go back to the way that you were previously having to take all the time for your email. Right. And then if you do want to sign up for one of the subscriptions there, you can get $25 credit toward one of those subscriptions by going to our website there. In the know. All right, so we're going to cheat just a little bit on this this week, Jeff, just because there was so much. But we're going to select our favorite announcement from the past Apple event week here. And I will tell you, mine has to do with the Apple Watch Ultra. I will tell you the thing that got me the most excited when I was watching about the watch section or segment that they were talking about, Jeff, was they finally are now going to release a new Apple Watch face called the Modular Ultra. So when the Apple Watch Ultra came out, it was a bigger screen, obviously, and they had a very specific watch face. I'm blanking on the name that they had it there now. It was called Altimeter. Anyway, it was a new watch face that came out just for the Apple Watch because it took better advantage of that bigger screen. Now, I don't use that watch face very much, but one of the things that was really cool on it is that not only could you have it in the colorful aspect, but if you, on this particular watch face, if you spun the digital crown a little bit, it would go into an all bright red. In fact, I think this story that you linked to here has it. Yeah, there it is. So everything would go this red, which is almost like a red light in the nighttime, right? So it was just very cool and very effective because I used it even on some hikes that I went and did. But I wanted more. I wanted more for my watch face. And when I saw this, they were talking about it. Apple was talking about this as if this was a new watch face only for the Apple Watch Ultra 2. But this is a story from Leander Caney, of course, at Cult of Mac. And he has verified for me very happily that this Modular Ultra is also going to be available on the first Apple Watch Ultra. And I am almost ready to upgrade to iOS 17. I'm going to wait a few more days because I can do that now, just so that I can get this in the new. Let's see, this will be WatchOS 10, I believe. I can put up to 8 different complications on the watch face, Jeff. That's amazing. I cannot wait. Almost at the risk of like too much information, I'm going to get confused. But I'm willing to take the hit on that. Like, I want to see it. I cannot wait for the new Apple Watch face called Modular Ultra. I'll report next week how that goes.
Look forward to hearing it. So for my tip today, I'm going to change my mind, Brett. I was going to focus on the button on the iPhone Pro, but you and I have already talked about the action button. So I'm going to talk about something different that we haven't mentioned yet. One of the new features of all of the new iPhones, not only this year's, but I think this actually worked with last year's too. If you have a phone that supports satellite SOS, it will also now support satellite, I'll call it satellite help. It's not necessarily an emergency. I don't need you to send the ambulance, but what if you have, a flat tire, or you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're running out of gas or something crazy like that. And so if you are out of cell phone service range, you might think, I'm just completely SOL. What am I going to do? How can I contact anybody? But if you're in the middle of nowhere, but you can see the sky on top of you, then That's okay because your phone can talk to satellites and you can use it to
Oh,
say, I'm not having an emergency that I need to have an ambulance, but I do need some assistance. And you click on some buttons saying, like, what is your problem? I'm locked out. I ran out of gas. I have a flat tire. My car doesn't start. My car is stuck. And it will connect you to AAA, which this is only
yeah.
in the United States, the American Automobile Association. AAA offers roadside assistance that they can help you out. If you are already a AAA member, well, then this works out great. They just come out and get you just as if you called them on a regular phone.
Right.
If you're not currently a AAA member, that's okay too, because they will also offer like a pay per use. And I haven't heard all the details about it. And I suspect that they'll say, okay, you're not a AAA member. So for us to come out and fix your flat tire, or for us to come out and help your vehicle start, it's going to cost X
Yeah.
amount of dollars. But I tell you what, if you're in the middle of nowhere outside of range,
Worth it.
it's probably worth it. And
Yeah.
so I love that this is a feature on the phones. I love that this is going to be a feature, when my kids get phones that support this on my kids' phones
Right.
too, because much like emergency services on your watch, on your iPhone or anything else, you hope that you never get into the situation where you need it. But if you do, you're so happy to have it. And that's what we always say about the
Yeah.
life-saving
Yeah.
services. But now, even for things that are not necessarily life-saving services, like a flat tire, it's nice to know that you can get help when you're out there. So I mean, this was a complete surprise. I heard no rumor that this
Yeah.
feature was coming out at all. And when Apple described this on Tuesday, I'm like, you know what? I feel I have more peace of mind knowing that this is out there. If I never use it, great. But if I ever do need it, it's going to be
It's
fantastic to
right
get some
there.
help. I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
I think they even showed the AAA logo on Tuesday, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they talked about this and it's been a lot of time on it, but I'm glad that you selected this and talked a little bit more because it didn't reverberate with me as much that this was going to be like it's like an OnStar service, right? Like the
Yeah.
old OnStar from the cars that now I can use this, but not just as a cellular call, like it's through satellite, which I am really appreciating the fact now that Apple is going more and more to the satellite. There was either a story from you or somebody that I was seeing that they are investing even more with like what SpaceX and I forget the satellite company's name now, but they're like that Apple is investing a lot more into those satellites so that they can use more percentage of even the bandwidth. So to me, the fact that they have the emergency, that was like one of the first shots across the bow, right? Now that they're incorporating roadside assistance into the satellite, who knows where they're going to be going next, Jeff? I mean, this is just amazing that they're continuing to push this far. I feel like they should have just purchased AAA, right? They could have been triple Apple then at that point.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
something like that. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
they will at some point on
Well, let
that.
me answer your
Okay.
question, Brett. Where
Yeah.
are they
Yeah.
going to go
Yeah.
next?
Please.
My hope is that we get to a point in the future that they have enough satellite bandwidth that they say, even if you're in the middle of nowhere, you can still text with friends and family. That's what I
Yeah.
would love to see.
That
If
would be
I'm
amazing.
hiking, I'm off
We
the
got to go
grid,
there.
but I
Right.
do want to send a text just to let my parents know everything's fine. I'll see y'all next week, something like that.
Right.
That would be
Right.
nice. But again, Apple has to have the additional satellite bandwidth to support text messaging. I hope that
Mm-hmm.
that comes in the future. It probably won't include videos or photo support. It'll probably be like
Yeah.
old style, SMS with just text, but that would be
That's okay
fine.
though.
So
Right.
if Apple
Right.
gets there in the next couple of years, I would be really happy. But for now, we have roadside assistance, which is cool.
Okay. I know that was a lot. We'll have more to talk
Big
about, but
show,
thanks for
big
staying with
show.
us, everybody. If you want to get a little more information about SaneBox, sanebox.com/in the news. We thank them for sponsoring. Jeff, always good and fun to talk with you, especially after an Apple announcement. And I know we'll have more to talk next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye bye, everybody.